everybody. At this point, as you're working on your first draft of the profile paper, I recognize that it can be a little challenging and that it's easy to get stuck. This is a genre that you may not be as familiar with, and there are a couple of different ways at least to organize the paper, and so I thought that I would kind of jump right in and that I would work on writing my own profile with you, a new one. Um, when I was in English 1A or whatever it was called, the equivalent of that, I I thought I wanted to be a medical doctor. So I decided I would profile a medical doctor. Fortunately for me, my little brother, William Fisher, is a doctor. So I spoke with him. I've also had chances to observe him here and there that I've sort of worked into the profile, although I admit I did take some creative license because I couldn't go right up to San Francisco. Palo Alto now is where he works, to observe him for this assignment, but hopefully it'll get you the idea. Okay, so regardless of the kind of way that you're going to organize your profile, I recommend starting the introduction the same way. I need to know the person you spoke with, when it happened, approximately, where they work, what they do, and where and when did you go to observe them. So you can see this is my attempt to answer those questions. I still need to check some names. This is still very much a draft. And then at the end of your introduction, you're going to want a thesis statement. So the most important thing that your thesis statement is going to do is it's going to convey your dominant impression, the main idea that you want people to have about this profession. And after listening to my brother, asking him questions, the dominant impression that I had when I looked over all of my notes was that being a critical care doctor is challenging. So I've gone ahead and I've used what we call a signal phrase to signal that my thesis is coming. You don't have to include a signal phrase. Some teachers are going to ask you to do that, others aren't, but I thought that I would use a signal phrase, so that's the underlined part. This profile will show that. A phrase like that signals that a thesis is coming. Being an acute care doctor is challenging. So this is the most important part of my thesis, where I'm conveying my dominant impression. But because I decided that I wanted to work topically, I'm including a list that's going to preview the list or the organization of my paper. So it's challenging because of the many years of education and training, the long hours, and the emotional toll of working with the sickest patients and their families. So what I've done is I've set up for myself a rough outline for the paper. So I'm going to work on a section that's about the education and training, and I've got a draft of that here. I'm going to need a section on the long hours, and I don't have a draft of that at all yet. I'm still working on my draft, obviously. And then I need a section on the emotional toll. And in that section with the emotional toll, I included some quotes from my brother. So let's take a look at that. One of the most challenging parts of working in the ICU is the emotional toll it takes on the professionals who work there. So you see here, I've got a topic sentence that emphasizes my dominant impression and previews the topic that's coming up. Everyone has to die sometime. It's the universal imperative, said Dr. Fisher. Now, I don't need to cite Dr. Fisher here because I'm naming him. In MLA, though, if you don't name the person that you're quoting, their name, last name goes in parentheses after the quote. But for me, this isn't necessary since I've already identified him in the text itself. Now I'm talking about me, the writer, I've often asked my brother if being around death all the time is hard on him, and he tends to shrug it off. So this is what's called an indirect quote. I'm talking about what I've asked my brother, but I'm not using my own words, so I don't need to start a new paragraph. Look, he said, and since he's still the one talking, I don't need a new paragraph. I've always been good at compartmentalizing my emotions, even at turning them off. Maybe it means I'm broken. Most of my patients are unconscious. We don't develop a relationship because we can't. So in a way that protects me. I pressed a little harder. Knowing my brother the way I do, I know he's capable of a lot of feeling. Again, this is an indirect quote, so I don't need to start a new line, but here I'm using my direct words. So I start, this is dialogue essentially. So I start a new paragraph. Hasn't there been a time that you were really emotionally involved? I asked. And then he tells me about a time when that happened. So I'm still working. I think I kind of want to make this section a little longer, maybe one more paragraph. And I know I need at least one paragraph on the long hours. I'm already on to page 3 though, so I'm doing well, and I haven't even written my conclusion yet. So here are some things that you should think about answering in the conclusion. And I think that once I do that, answer those questions and create my works cited page, which we'll talk about in just a minute, that I should be done. Now, this is one way to organize the paper, and this is the topical way. You can also organize your paper as a narrative. You can tell a story. In that case, your thesis would probably stop with the dominant impression. This profile will show that being an acute care doctor is challenging. And then I would tell the story of arriving at the hospital and what I notice. I would talk about meeting my brother in the hospital cafeteria. But again, every detail that I choose has to convey the idea that this is a challenging job. So I wouldn't talk about the gentle sound of the waterfall and the calm quiet, because I want to emphasize that it's challenging. So if it was crowded, I could talk about that. I could talk about the stressed looks on people's faces in the lobby, because that emphasizes the idea that it's challenging. Anyway, you get the idea. I'm telling a story of my observation and my interview. You want to be very careful, though, if you use a narrative approach, that part of your paper doesn't just become a transcript of your interview. And the way that you do that is you want to make sure that you're picking out details that always emphasize your dominant impression, whatever that is. Your dominant impression could be more than just a word. I could have said that being an acute care doctor is challenging but rewarding. I could have said that it's challenging and rewarding and requires a very special person. That to me didn't come through in talking to my brother as much, although don't get me wrong, he's a very special person. I decided I could go with just this, but your dominant impression can be as many words long as you need it to be. And then your conclusion for this profile would be very similar, the same really, as your conclusion for a topical profile. Now, the one thing that you need to remember and not to forget is the works cited page. So a works cited page is always continuously paginated. So your works cited page, if this is page 4, your works cited page is going to be on page 5. So, sorry, I'm used to working on Word on a PC. But anyway, here we go. You're going to want to center your title, and your title needs to be works cited. Not bigger, not bold, just centered and in the same 12-point double space font. Then you're going to go back and left justify your margin. And to cite a personal interview, it's really easy. You give the last name of the person, their first name, then you write the words personal interview, and then you give the date that you interviewed the person. And that's it. If you have more than one interview, you're going to want to remember that you alphabetize by the last name of your interviewee or the author if you have more than one source. And that, I think, is everything. Please feel free to contact me if you have any questions. And remember, this handout is going to be available on Canvas. It should be right below this video. Okay, everyone, I hope you're having a good time writing the profile. Hopefully it's been a fun and interesting exercise. And let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.